So the Indiana Jones franchise has to be said as it's one of the most beloved and well-established franchises really in all of Hollywood history. It's been celebrated for such a long time. Over 40 years ago, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, real life best friends, but also at that particular time, pretty much two of the most powerful filmmakers in the industry decided to team up together to make Raiders of the Lost Ark. They were coming off of the heels of such successful films like Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They were on an incredible run. And so they decided to join
Mhm.
forces to create this new franchise that was inspired by the serials of the 30s and 40s that they grew up watching. Of course, that film was starring Harrison Ford, who was on the ascent to becoming one of the biggest movie stars in the world at that particular time. And then it spawned three other sequels. And throughout the 80s, again, the Indiana Jones franchise had long been considered one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. That isn't until 2008 when they decided to release Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which was 19 years after The Last Crusade. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted to team up one last time to tell a final Indiana Jones adventure and story. Unfortunately, that movie's just not that great. It's a much maligned sequel. I don't particularly like it. It
Mhm.
definitely went a little bit too far and over the top, I think, for what people were expecting out of an Indiana Jones story. And so, in these subsequent 15 years, since the release of that movie, the idea of making one last Indiana Jones installment had pretty much always been on the table. Disney and Lucasfilm, or excuse me, Disney acquired Lucasfilm back in 2012 and decided to make another Indiana Jones movie. And also, Harrison Ford himself talked about wanting to create a little bit more closure for the character because he was not completely satisfied with what they did with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull back in an '08. So, with all of that context out the way, let's go ahead and talk about this movie. And I'll pass it over to you, man. What did you think about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny?
What a beloved franchise in Indiana Jones, man. You already said it, but I can't believe here in the year of 2023 that we're reviewing an Indiana Jones movie. It really is just kind of crazy to conceptualize and to think about. But Indiana Jones really has been still a mainstay for such a long period of time. I know we go to like Universal Studios and Disney places and things like that. Indiana Jones is always present. In fact, I remember at Hollywood Studios, there's still like a whole Indiana Jones like thing that they do, and they show you live action, how the effects are and how things work with stunts and stunt doubles and things like that. So it's kind of crazy that this franchise in the character even of Indiana Jones has been here for so long, man. And I think, coming into this film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, one of the things I really like about this film, I have to take that with a grain of salt. This is something that something about the film that I really like is some of the fan service they do in the movie is kind of cool to me. There's some callbacks to some the original Indiana Jones trilogy a lot of the times, and a lot of times when they were doing that in the film, I was like, huh, I didn't mind that. I enjoyed some of the fan servicey things going on there. I'll also start by saying that Indiana Jones, I think, has always played well off of adventures, and one of the things that doesn't work, I think, as well in this film is how I think the adventure plays out. It's not as, I guess, maybe thrilling is the word. I don't know what the word is. It's not as fun as some of the other older Indiana Jones movies are. And to be honest, part of it is the fatigue I felt while watching the film. This movie it's so long. It is so long. What is it? It's sitting at 230 something. It's like 224 is what this movie sits at. And a lot of the other Indiana Jones films, I know the first two in particular, sit like right under two, like 159 or something like that, 158. And it's something that in the middle of it, I was like, wow, we are still going here in Indiana Jones. It really can be an exhausting movie to watch, especially again when a lot of it is adventure. So that's something that took away from the film for me a little bit. Another thing that took away from the film for me a little bit, to be honest, is Phoebe Waller-Bridges' character. I think the inclusion of her just doesn't work for me completely. It took away, I think, for the reason a lot of us are there in Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones is known to have a lot of companions in his adventures, right? It's something here where it felt like there was too much Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It was too much of her character and not enough of just give us the Indiana that we know and love. In fact, in a lot of this film, again, the parts I do like is when Harrison Ford is being his natural charismatic self. A lot of the times I was like, okay, I'm here for this. But then it goes to People Waller Bridge, and the story between their two characters is when they kept losing me in what was going on, because she's not even one of the, like, a classic character, you know what I mean? She's not even one of the people that they were giving fan service for. She really was just there to help prepare the story and give Indiana Jones reason to do what he was doing. And it just didn't always work for me. A couple other things I add at the beginning of the film, there is a really long sequence, which I actually like the sequence. I didn't mind it's a big flashback. The CGI, I don't know why we decided to. I don't know. I just don't know what direction we decided to go in completely. But they pretty much de-aged Harrison Ford, which I like the concept. There's a couple times where the de-aging worked. It usually happened when it was dark, though. When it was dark, it was like, okay, that looks really good. Unfortunately, they decided multiple times to keep putting the de-aged Harrison Ford in the light. And so instead of really focusing what's happening in the film, you're just like, what is this de-aged Harrison Ford doing? I don't know. I was thinking about that more than I was thinking about the adventure that Indiana Jones had going on. And so that was happening throughout the beginning of the film. There was other couple flashbacks where they did show de-aged Harrison Ford. So it happened a couple other times. But really, it was in the beginning. It was up and down for me. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And it was, again, it was making a mixed bag of emotions for me at the beginning of the movie, because I think in the grand scheme of what they're trying to do, it does look good. But when you throw into a feature-length movie and people whose eyes are constantly focusing on something, it can throw you at the movie a numerous amount of times, man. And so, all in all, it's a fine Indiana Jones movie. It's not great. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's an okay watch. It's too long. Uh, I I wish Phoebe Waller Bridges' character. I wish there was a little bit less of her. And yeah, man, it's just okay. There's it. I don't mind this being the last Indiana Jones movie. I'm like, okay, we hung up the hat. Let's keep it hung up. You know what I'm saying? And get out of here, because again, Harrison Ford is getting old. It feels like a last adventure. It feels like a wrap up, and I'm okay with that, man. So let's just end it here, and it's fine. And I think at some point in time, uh, uh, I think when this is on streaming, it might do decent numbers because it is long. I think people will have a chance to say, I'm gonna break this up, or I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and come back to it. But overall, still a little bit disappointed for me, again, coming from James Mangold, who I was really excited to see his take on this franchise. But not a bad movie. Not a bad movie.
So I should also mention that this is the first film in the franchise to not be directed by Steven Spielberg. The last one that he directed, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Again, as I said, a very much detestable movie by most considerations, but I do think that the one key difference between Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and now the Dial of Destiny is the fact that you still had Steven Spielberg. You still had one of the most talented and celebrated and greatest film directors ever behind the camera of that movie. And as wild and as over the top as it got in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I mean, we're talking about flying monkeys. We're talking about Harrison Ford getting in refrigerators and surviving atomic bomb explosions. Like, it was stupid. It honestly gotten stupid. But you still had a certain element of joy to the Indiana Jones adventure that you were watching. And I think that my biggest criticism about the Dial of Destiny, a movie that I don't really enjoy all that much, though it is fine, is the fact that it lacks a lot of the joy that we've come to associate with the Indiana Jones franchise for over 40 years now. I just didn't have that much fun watching the movie. Many of the sequences that were taking place were cool and they were well crafted, and I don't deny the technical craftsmanship that went behind them, because there had to be a lot of artistry and technical work on display here to bring these really big bombastic sequences to life, because we do come to an Indiana Jones film for the adventure and for the action sequences. And so that stuff was crafted in a really believable way for the most part, but I never got that sense of joy and that sense of buoyancy that you got out of those original three films in particular, because the place that we find Indy in this movie is very different than how he used to be, because this is an aging Indy. This movie takes place in 1969, which is about 12 years after the last movie, and he's in about his 70s. And Harrison Ford, when he filmed this movie, was about 78. Now he's 80. We're watching a man who is obviously on the last stretch of his life. He's dealing with a lot of regret. He's dealing with a lot of things that he probably wish he could have done differently. And he's also dealing with an evolved world around him. And all of that stuff kind of makes sense, but I don't know if I totally believe it. quickly point out one scene in this movie. It's not a spoiler, but just something that I think really illustrates where I'm coming from. But you see Harrison Ford, as we do in other films in the franchise, teaching a class. He's teaching, his academic class. It's an archaeological class in college, and none of the kids are at all interested. They're all very
Mm-hmm.
disengaged. They're falling asleep. They don't want to be there. At this point in history, they're more interested in the moon landing. And while on the surface that might seem like something that makes sense, I don't believe that one, Indiana Jones would be teaching a class where the kids aren't interested. And two, if there are kids that are in a class taught by Dr. Henry Jones, I don't believe that they would be disengaged and disinterested. I would believe that they
Yeah.
would actually want to be there and they would be passionate and interested. And so from the very get go, there were just a lot of things that sort of strained credulity for me. And so it was hard to buy into just the entire adventure to begin with. That doesn't mean that the film isn't without its benefits and without its pluses. There are a few things I liked. You already noted the opening sort of 20-minute flashback sequence, which I thought by and large was executed really well, but I do agree about the CGI and the de-aging. Somehow we've gotten worse with this. Like it's just not working because you watch a movie like Captain Marvel and you see Samuel L. Jackson and it's like that looks really good. And then you come here and it's
Mm-hmm.
just not working. And I don't know if it's maybe just the age gap because we're trying to pick up a Harrison Ford who's, sort of in his 40s in that sequence, but he's in real life approaching 80. Maybe it's just the time gap. I don't know what it is, but it just wasn't all that convincing to me. And then when you go even beyond that with some of like the technical stuff, I think that a lot of the CGI that's utilized in this film, they rely far too heavily on it. The Indiana Jones franchise has been known for its practicality. It's been known for its real stunts, its stunt doubles, just all of this stuff that is super believable on screen. And this movie just doesn't look that great all the time because they employ so much CGI technology. And that just ripped
Mm-hmm.
me out of the film at many different points in time. One last like positive note that I will attribute to this film is something that's consistent with the entire franchise. The final acts of Indiana Jones movies always take super big swings. They always go in these
Yeah.
crazy directions. Raiders
Yeah.
of the Lost Ark, you got Nazis' faces melting when they find the
Crazy.
Ark of the Covenant. It's a crazy sequence. Temple of Doom, you have this warrior ripping somebody's heart out of a man's chest. That's a crazy scene. Last Crusade, there's ghosts and spirits and all these different things, right? Even Kingdom of the
Mm-hmm.
Crystal Skull, again, it's over the top, but you get aliens. You get aliens at the end of that movie, and it's like, well, that was unexpected. And I do think that they continue that trend here. There is a really cool final act action sequence, and it leans into the title of this movie and just the idea behind the MacGuffin, this time travel sort of device. And I thought that was really surprising and really cool. I think unfortunately by the end of it, I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of finality to the character or to the franchise, because the reason they came back here to begin with is to tell a final Indiana Jones adventure. And when you look at the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and the ending of that movie, that feels more, I don't know, perfunctory for the character than this one does. Like I didn't feel all those emotions that I thought I would
Yeah.
feel. Like this feels like that closure for Indy that we wanted and that we needed for all of these years. I didn't get that feeling by the end of
Yeah.
it. There is a nice callback. They do bring back some characters that remind you of those earlier films, but it didn't really punctuate the point home for me. It didn't underscore why this film had to exist to begin with. Like I understand that they didn't feel satisfied based off of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I just don't feel that the ending and just the story that it took us to get there really justified the existence of the movie, because I think that all in all, for all of its faults, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull kind of left the character off in a better place than this one did. And that's really unfortunate and tragic, because you want to see why they would
Mm-hmm.
come back, and you would want to see why they would actually go back to the well and tell the story one last time. And so that's kind of where I am with the movie. It's something that I don't know how many more times I'll revisit in the future. It is fine. I think it's okay. It's slightly better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I don't think significantly, which is, again, sort of an unfortunate standpoint to look at it from based off of how long we had to wait to arrive at this point. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you've checked out this movie, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.